He had a plan. The alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He mustn't wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet's Drive and get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept across the dark hall towards the front door. Rawr! Harry leapt into the air. He trotted on something big and squashy on the doormat. Something alive. Lights clicked on upstairs, and to his horror, Harry realised that the big squashy something had been his uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the foot of the throne in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure Harry didn't do exactly what he'd been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for about half an hour, and then told him to go and make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably off into the kitchen. By the time the post had arrived, right into Uncle Vernon's lap, Harry could see 3 letters pressed in green ink. "I want," he began. Uncle Vernon was tearing letters into pieces before his eyes. Uncle Vernon didn't go to work that day. He sat home and nailed up the letterbox. "See," he explained to Aunt Petunia through a mouthful of nails, "if they can't deliver them, they'll just get them." "I'm not sure that'll work, Vernon." "Oh, these people's minds work in strange ways, Petunia. They're not like you and me," said Uncle Vernon, knocking a nail with a piece of fruitcake Aunt Petunia had just bought him. On Friday, no fewer than 12 letters arrived for Harry. As they couldn't go through the letterbox, they'd been pushed under the door, slotted through the sides, and a few even forced through the downstairs toilet. Uncle Vernon stayed at home again. After burning the letters, he got out a hammer and nails and boarded up the cracks around the front and back doors so no one could get out. He hummed, tiptoed through the tulips as he worked, and jumped at small noises. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry found their way into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of 2 dozen eggs that their very confused milkman had had Junior through the living room window. While Uncle Vernon made furious telephone calls to the office and the dairy trying to find someone to complain to, Aunt Petunia shredded the letters in her food mixer. "Who on earth wants to talk to you this badly?" asked Harry in amazement. On Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the table looking tired and rather ill but happy. "No post on Sundays," he reminded them happily as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. "No damn letter." Something came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as he spoke and caught him sharply in the back of the head. Next moment, 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of the fireplace like bullets. The Dursleys ducked, but Harry leapt into the air to catch one. "Out! Out!" Uncle Vernon seized Harry around and threw him into the hall. When Aunt Petunia and Dudley had ran out with their arms over their faces, Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. They could hear the letters still shrieking, bouncing off the walls and floor. "That does it," said Uncle Vernon, trying to speak calmly but pulling great tufts out of his moustache at the same time. "I want you all back here in 5 minutes, ready to leave. We're going away. Just pack some clothes. No arguments." He looked so dangerous with half his moustache missing that no one could argue. 10 minutes later, they'd wrenched their way through the boarded-up doors and were in the car speeding towards the motorway. Dudley was sniffling in the... His father had hit him round the head for holding them up while he tried to pack his television, video, and computer in his sports bag. They drove and they drove. Even Aunt Petunia didn't dare ask where they were going. Every now and then Uncle Vernon would stop turning and drive in the opposite direction for a while. "Shake 'em off. Shake 'em off," he would mutter whenever he did this. They didn't stop to eat or drink all day. By nightfall, Dudley was howling. He'd never had such a life. He was hungry. He'd missed 5 television programs he'd wanted to see, and he'd gone so long without blowing up an alien on his computer. Uncle Vernon stopped at last, outside a gloomy-looking hotel on the outskirts of the big city. Dudley and Harry shared a room with twin beds and damp, musty sheets. He snored, but Harry stayed awake, sitting on the windowsill, staring down at the lights of passing cars and wondering. They ate stale flakes and cold tinned tomatoes on toast for breakfast next day. They had just finished when the owner of the hotel came over to their table. "Excuse me, but is one of you Mr. H. Potter? I've got about 100 of these at the front desk," she said so they could read the green ink address. "Mr. H. Potter, room 17, Bellevue Hotel, Oakworth." Harry made a grab for the letter, But Uncle Vernon knocked his hand out of the way. The woman stared. "I'll say," said Uncle Vernon, standing up quickly and following her from the dining room. "Wouldn't it be better just to go home, dear?" Aunt Petunia suggested timidly, hours later. But Uncle Vernon didn't seem to hear her. Exactly what he was looking for, none of them. He drove them into the middle of a forest, got out, looked around, shook his head, got back in a car, and off they went again. The same thing happened in the middle of a ploughed field, halfway across a suspension bridge, and at the top of a multi-story car park. "Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he?" Dudley asked Aunt Petunia dully late that afternoon. Uncle Vernon had parked at the coast, locked them all inside the car, and disappeared. It started to rain. Great drops on the roof of the car. Dudley snivelled. "It's Monday," he told his mother. "The great Umberto's on tonight. I want to stay somewhere with the television." Monday. This reminded Harry of something. If it was Monday, and you could usually count on Tuesday, it's Harry's 11th birthday. Of course, his birthdays were never exactly fun. Last year, the Dursleys had given him a canger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Still, he went to the 11th day. Uncle Vernon was back, and he was smiling. He was also carrying a long, thin package that didn't answer Aunt Petunia when she asked what it was. "Found a perfect place," he said. "Come on, everyone out." It was very cold outside the car. Uncle Vernon was pointing at what looked like a large rock way out to sea. Perched on top of the rock was the most miserable little shack you could imagine. One thing was certain, there was no television in it. "Storm forecast for tonight," said Uncle Vernon gleefully, clapping his hand together. "And this gentleman's kindly agreed to lend us his boat." A toothless old man came ambling up to them, pointing, with a rather wicked grin, at an old rowing, bobbing, the iron-grey water below them. "Already got us rations," said Uncle Vernon. "It's all aboard." It was freezing on the boat. Icy sea spray and rain crept down their necks, and a chilly wind whipped. After what seemed like hours, they reached the rock, where Uncle Vernon, slipping and sliding, led the way to the broken-down house. The inside was horrible. It smelled strongly of seaweed, the wind whistled through the gaps in the wood, and the fireplace was damp and empty. There were only 2 rooms. Uncle Vernon's rations turned out to be a packet of crisps each and 4 bananas. He tried to start a fire, but the empty crisp packets just smoked and shriveled up. "Doing some of those letters now, eh?" he said cheerfully. He was in a bad mood. Obviously, he thought nobody stood a chance of reaching them here in a storm to deliver post. Harry privately agreed, though the thought didn't chill. As night fell, the promised storm blew up around them. Spray from the high waves splattered the walls of the hut, and a fierce wind rattled the filthy windows. Aunt Petunia found a few mouldy blankets in the second, made up a bed for Dudley on the moth-eaten sofa. She and Uncle Vernon went to the lumpy bed next door, and Harry was left to find the softest bit of floor he could, and to curl up under the thinnest, most ragged blanket. It reached more and more ferociously as the night went on. Harry couldn't sleep. He shivered and turned over, trying to get comfortable, his stomach rumbling with hunger. Dudley's snores were drowned by the low rolls of thunder that started near midnight. The lighted dial of Dudley's watch, which was dangling over the edge of the sofa on his fat wrist, told Harry he'd be 11 in 10 minutes' time. He lay and watched his birthday tick nearer, wondering if the Dursleys would remember, wondering where the letter writer was now. 5 minutes to go. Harry heard something creak outside. He hoped the roof wasn't going to fall in, though it might be warmer if it did. 4 minutes to go. Maybe the private drive would be so full of letters when they got back that he'd be able to steal one somehow. 3 minutes to go. Was that the sea, slapping hard on the rock like that? And 2 minutes to go. A crunching noise. Was the rock crumbling into the sea? 1 minute to go, and he'd be 11. 30 seconds. 20. 10. 9. Maybe he'd wake Dudley up just to annoy him. 3, 2, 1. The shack shivered, and Harry sat bolt upright, staring at the door. Someone was outside, knocking to come in. 4. The keeper of the keys. They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them. Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in the long, thin package he'd brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause. Then, smash! The door hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges and with a deafening crash landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild beard, but you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooped so that his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. "Couldn't make us a cup of tea. It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa where Dudley was frozen with fear. "Budge up, you great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching terrified at Uncle Vernon. "And here's Harry," said the giant. He looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetle eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "You look like your dad, but you've got your mum's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. "I demand that you leave at once, sir," he said. "You are breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made of rubber, and threw it into the corner of the... Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trodden on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. Got something for you here. I might at some point, but it'll taste all right." From an inside pocket of his black coat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with Happy Berry written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth, and what he said instead was, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubius Hagrid, keeper of the key grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea then, eh?" he said, rubbing her. "I don't say no to something stronger if you got it in mind." His eyes on the empty grate with the shriveled crisp packets in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of the pockets of his coat. A copper kettle, a squashy packet of sausages, poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid, which he took a swig from before starting to make tea. The hut was full of sound and the smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great pudding of a son don't need fatted anymore, Dursley, don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything. But he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody was about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't really know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of the keys at Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," Harry said quickly. "Sorry," barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them that should be sorry. I know you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't even know about Hogwarts out loud. Did you never wonder why your parents learned it all?" "All what?" asked Harry. Your what? Hagrid thundered. Now wait just one. He had leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. Do you mean to tell me, he growled at the Dursleys, that this boy, talking about anything? Harry thought this was going a bit far. He'd been to school after all, and his marks weren't bad. I know some things, he said. I can, do maths and stuff. Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, about our world, I mean. What world? My world, your parents' world. What world? Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. Dark, he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that's like, Mimble Wimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. But you must know about your mum and dad, he said. I mean, famous. You're famous. What? My mum and dad were famous, were they? You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. You know who are, he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. Stop, he commanded. Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell the boy anything. A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quelled under the furious now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. You never told him. Never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley. And you've kept from him all these years. Kept what from me? Said Harry eagerly. I forbid you, yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. Ah, go boil your heads, both of you, said Hagrid. You're a wizard. There was silence in the hut. Only and the whistling wind could be heard. I'm a... what? Gasped Harry. A wizard, of course, said Hagrid, sitting back on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. And a thumping good night, see? One trained up a bit. With mum and dad like yours, what else could you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter. Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope, addressed in emerald green, to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, rock, the sea. He pulled out the letter and read. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, into Convent of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on 1st of September. We await your later than the 31st of July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Headmistress. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered. What does it mean they await my owl? Galloping Gorgons, that reminds me. Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse. And from yet another pocket inside his overcoat, he pulled an owl. A real, live, rather awful-looking owl, a long quill and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note, which Harry could read upside down. Dear Mr. Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Hope you're well, Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped it in his beak, went to the door and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down, as though this was as normal as talking on the telephone. Hagrid realised his mouth was open, and closed it quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid. But at that moment, Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. He's not going, he said. Hagrid. I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Said Harry, interested. A muggle, said Hagrid. It's what we call non-magic folk like them. And it's your bad luck, you're really the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in, we'd put a stop to that rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. Swore we'd stab it out of him. Wizard indeed. You knew, said you knew I'm a wizard. Knew? Shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be? My dratted sister being what she was. Oh, she got a letter just like that, and disappeared off to that school. He came home every holiday with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud in the family. She stopped to draw breath and then went ranting on. It seemed she had been wanting to say all this for years. Then she met that Potter at school, and they left and got married and had you. And of course, I knew you just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you. Harry had gotten very white. As soon as he said, blown up? You told me they died in a car crash. Car crash? Roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back to their corner. How could a car crash kill Lily and Jack? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry Potter not knowing his own story. When a kid in our world knows his name. But why? What happened? Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. I never expected this, he said in a low, worried voice. I had no idea. When Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting hold of you, how much you didn't know. Harry, I don't know if I'm a person to tell you, but someone's gotta. You can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing. He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery part of it. He stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, Begins, I suppose, with a person called... But it's incredible to know his name. Everyone in our world knows. Who? Well, we don't like saying his name if I can help it. No one does. Why not? Don't be gargoyles, Harry. People are still scared. This is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad. As bad as you could go. Worse. Worse and worse. His name was... Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. Could you write it down? Harry suggested. Nah. Can't spell it. All right. Voldemort. Hagrid shuddered. Don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started with the followers. Got him too. And we're afraid some just wanted a bit of his power. Because he was getting himself power, all right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't hold a trust. Didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taking over. Of course, some stood up to him. And he killed them. Horribly. One of the only safe places it was. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't ever try taking the school. Not just then, anyway. Now, your mum and dad were as good a witch and wizard as I ever knew. That boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Most mesquite is why you know who never tried to get him on this side before. Probably he was too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade him. Maybe he just wanted him out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you was living on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to your island, and... Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. Sorry, he said, but it's not sad. Know your mum and dad and nurse a people you couldn't find. Anyway, you know who killed him. And then, and this is the real mystery of the thing, he tried to kill you too. Wanted to make a clean job, I suppose. Or maybe he just liked killing by then. He couldn't do it. I wondered how you got that mark on your forehead. I was no ordinary cut. It's what you get when a powerful evil curse touches you. To carry your mum and dad and your house even. It didn't work on you. That's why you're famous, Harry. No one ever lived after he decided to kill him. No one except you. And he killed some of the best witches and wizards of the age. McCannons, the Bones, the Pruitts, and you were only a few left. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw again the blinding flash of green light, more clearly than he had ever remembered it before. And he remembered something else, for the first time in his life. A high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. Took you from the ruined house myself, on Dumbledore's orders. Brought you to this lot. Load of old gosh, said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped. He had forgotten the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have got back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid with his fists clenched.
Now you listen here, he snarled. I accept there's something strange about you. Probably nothing a good beating wouldn't have cured. And as for this about your parents, well, they were weirdos, no denying it. And worth better off without them, in my opinion. For all they got, getting mixed up with these wizarding types. Just what I expected. Always knew they'd come to a sticky end.
But at that moment, Hagrid leapt from the sofa and drew a battered pink umbrella from inside his coat. Hitting this at Uncle Vernon like a sword, he said, I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm with you one more word. In danger of being speared on the end of an umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself again and fell silent. That's better, said Hagrid, breathing heavy and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right down to the floor. Harry, meanwhile, still had questions to ask. Hundreds of them. But sorry, I mean, you know who?
Good question. Disappeared. Vanished. Same night he tried to kill you. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, see? He was getting more. Why'd he go? Some say he died. God's one of it, boy. Don't know if he had enough human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time, like. I don't believe it. People who was on his came back to ours. Some of them came out of kind of trances. Don't reckon they could have if he was coming back. Most of us reckon he's still out there somewhere. Lost his powers. Too weak to carry on. There's something about you finished him out. There's something going on that night that he hadn't counted on. You know what it was? Something about you stumped him, all right.
Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect blazing in his eyes. But Harry, instead of feeling pleased now, felt quite sure there had been a horrible mistake. A wizard? How could he possibly be? He'd spent his life being clouted by Dudley and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If he was really a wizard, why hadn't they been turned into guilty toads every time they tried to lock him in his cupboard? If he'd once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? Hagrid, Dudley, I think you must have made a mistake. I don't think I could be a wizard. To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled.
Not a wizard, eh? Never made things happen when you was scared or angry.
Harry looked into the fire. Now he came to think about it. Every odd thing that had ever made his aunt and uncle furious with him had happened when he, Harry, had been upset or angry. Chased by Dudley's gang, he'd himself out of their reach. Dreading going to school with that ridiculous haircut, managed to make it grow back. And the very last time Dudley had hit him, and then he got his revenge, without even realizing he was doing it. Boa constrictor on him? Harry looked back at Hagrid, smiling, and saw that Hagrid was positively beaming at him.
See,
said Hagrid.
Harry Potter, not a wizard. You wait, you'll be right famous at Hogwarts.
But Uncle Vernon wasn't going to give in without a fight.
Haven't I told you he's not going?
He hissed.
He's going to Stonewall and be grateful for it. I've read those letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish, spells and wands, and if he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him, growled Hagrid. Stop Lily and James Potter's son going to Hogwarts? You're mad. He's been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world. 7 years there, and he won't know himself. He'll be with youngsters of his own sort for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster Hogwarts has ever had, Albus Dumbledore. I'm not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks,
yelled Uncle Vernon. But he had finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella and whirled it over his head.
No,
he thundered.
Insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me.
He brought the umbrella swishing down through the air to point at Dudley. There was a flash of violet light, a sound like a fire, a sharp squeal, and next second, Dudley was dancing on the spot with his hands clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned his back to them, Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through a hoses. Uncle Vernon roared. Pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley in another room, he cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind them. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard.
Shouldn't have lost me temper,
he said ruefully.
They didn't work anyway. Meant to turn him into a peg. Well, I suppose he was so much like a peg anyway, wasn't much left to do.
He cast a sideways look at Harry under his bushy eyebrows.
Be grateful if you did anyone at Hogwarts, he said. I'm, not supposed to do magic, strictly speaking. I was allowed to do a bit to follow you and get your letters to you and stuff. One of the reasons I was so keen to take the job.
Why aren't you smoking? Asked Harry.
Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, but I got a spell, to tell you the truth. In the 3rd year, he snapped my wand in half and everything. But Dumbledore let me stay on as gatekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore.
Why were you expelled?
It's getting late. We got lots to do tomorrow,
said Hagrid loudly.
Gotta get up to town, get all your books and that.
He took off his thick black coat and threw it to Harry.
You can keep under that,
he said.
Don't mind if it rails a bit. I think I've still got a couple of dormice in one pockets.
Chapter 5. Diagon Alley. Harry woke early the next morning. Although he could night, he kept his eyes shut tight. It was a dream, he told himself firmly. I dreamed a giant called Hagrid came to tell me I was going to a school for wizards. When I opened my eyes, I'll be at home in my cupboard. There was a sudden loud tapping noise. There's Aunt Petunia knocking at the door, Harry thought, his heart sinking. But he still didn't open his eyes. It had been such a good dream. Tap, tap, tap. Right, Harry mumbled. I'm getting up. He sat up and Hagrid's head coat fell off him. The hut was full of sunlight. The storm was over. Hagrid himself was asleep on a collapsed sofa, and there was an owl rapping its claw on the window, a newspaper held in its beak. Harry scrambled to his feet. So happy, he felt as though a large balloon was swelling inside him. He went straight to the window and jerked it open. The owl swooped in and dropped the newspaper, who didn't wake up. The owl then fluttered onto the floor and began to take Hagrid's coat. Don't do that! Harry tried to wave the owl out of the way, but it snapped its beak fiercely at him and carried on savaging the coat. Hagrid! Said Harry loudly. There's an owl!
Pay him,
Hagrid grunted into the sofa. What?
He wants paying for delivering the paper. Look in the pockets.
Hagrid's coat seemed to be made of butt pockets. Bunches of keys, slug pellets, balls of string, mint humbug, tea bags. Finally, Harry pulled out a handful of strange-looking coins.
Give him 5 nuts,
said Hagrid sleepily.
No, the little bronze ones.
Harry counted out 5 little bronze coins. The owl held out its legs so he could put the money into a small leather pouch tied to it. Then flew off through the open window. Hagrid yawned, sat up and stretched.
Best be off, Harry. Lots to do today. Gotta get up to London and buy all your stuff for school.
Harry was turning over the wizard coins and looking at them. He had just thought of something which made him feel as though the happy balloon inside him had got a puncture. Hagrid? Said Hagrid, who was pulling on his huge boobs. I haven't got any money. And you heard Uncle Vernon last night. He won't pay for me to go and learn magic.
Don't be about that,
said Hagrid, standing up and scratching his head.
Do you think your parents didn't leave you anything?
But if their house was destroyed?
They didn't keep their gold in the house, boy. Nah, first up for us is Gringotts, Wizard's Bank. Have a sausage. They're not bad cold, and I wouldn't say no to a bit of birthday cake neither.
Wizards have banks?
Just the one, Gringotts, run by goblins.
Harry dropped the bit of sausage he was holding. Goblins?
Yeah, and you'd be mad to try and rob it, I'll tell you that. Never meet goblins, Harry. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe. It's the Hogwarts. As a matter of fact, I gotta visit Gringotts anyway, for Dumbledore, Hogwarts business.
Hagrid drew himself up proudly.
He usually do important stuff for him. Bet you knew, getting things from Gringotts. Knows he can trust me, see? Got everything? Follow then.
Harry followed Hagrid out onto the rock. The sky was quite clear now, and the sea gleamed in the sunlight. The boat Uncle Vernon had hired was still there, with a lot of water in the bottom after the storm. How did you get here? Harry asked, looking around for another boat.
Flew,
said Hagrid. Flew?
Yeah, like this. Not supposed to use magic now I got you.
They settled down in the boat, Harry still staring at Hagrid, trying to imagine him flying.
Seems like you've seen the road, though, said Hagrid, giving Harry another of his sideways looks. Urged to, speed things up a bit. Would you mind not mentioning it at Hogwarts? Of course not, said Harry, eager to see more magic. Hagrid pulled out the pink umbrella again, tapped it twice on the side of the boat, and they sped off. Why would you be mad to try and rob Gringotts? Harry asked. Spells, enchantments, said Hagrid, unfolding his newspaper as he spoke. They say there's dragons guarding the high security vaults, and then you've got to find your way. Gringotts is hundreds of miles under London, see? Deep under the underground. You'll die of trying to get out, even if you did manage to get your hands on something. Harry sat and thought about this while Hagrid read his newspaper, The Daily Prophet. Harry told Vernon that people liked to be left alone while they did this, but it was very difficult. He never had so many questions in his life. Ministry of Magic messing things up as usual, Hagrid muttered, turning the page. There's a Ministry of Magic? Harry asked before he could stop himself. Of course, said Hagrid. They wanted Dumbledore minister, of course, but he'd never leave Hogwarts, so old Cornelius Fudge got the job. Bungler if there ever was one. So he pelts Dumbledore with owls every morning voice. But what does the Ministry of Magic do? Well, their main job is keeping from the muggles that there's still witches and wizards up and down the country. Why? Why? Blimey, Harry. Everyone will be wanting magic solutions to their problems. Nah, best we're left alone. At this moment, the boat bumped gently into the harbour wall. Hagrid folded up his newspaper, and they clambered up the stone steps onto the street. Passers-by stared a lot at Hagrid as they turned to the station. Harry couldn't blame them. Not only was Hagrid twice as tall as anyone else, he kept pointing at perfectly ordinary things like parking meters and saying loudly, See that, Harry? These muggles dream of, eh? Hagrid, said Harry, panting a bit as he ran to keep up. Did you say there are dragons in Gringotts? Well, so they say, said Hagrid. Crikey, I'd like a dragon. You'd like one? Ever since I was a kid. Here we go. They had reached the station. They were going to London in 5 minutes' time. Hagrid, who didn't understand muggle money, as he called it, gave the notes to Harry so he could buy their tickets. People stared more than ever on the train. Hagrid took up 2 seats and sat knitting what looked like a canary yellow circuit. Still got your letter, Harry? He asked as he counted stitches. Harry took the parchment envelope out of his pocket. Good, said Hagrid. A list there of everything you need. Harry unfolded the second piece of paper he hadn't noticed the night before and read, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First-year students will require 3 sets of plain black, 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear, 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar, 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes must carry set books. All students should have a copy of each of the following. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, by Miranda Goshawk. A History of Magic, by Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory, by Adol Wirt. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration, by Emmerich Switch. 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi, by Philidia Spore. Magical Draughts and Potions, by Arsenius Jigger. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, by Newt Scamander. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection, by Quentin Trimble. Other equipment: 1 wand, 1 cauldron, pewter, standard size 2, 1 set glass or crystal vials, telescope, 1 set brass skulls. Students may also bring a dog or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. Why all this in London? Harry wondered aloud. If you know where to go, Hagrid. Harry had never been to London before. Although Hagrid seemed to know where he was going, he was obviously not used to getting there in an ordinary way. He got stuck in the ticket barrier on the Underground and complained loudly that the seats were too small and the trains too slow. I don't know how the muggles manage without magic, he said, as they climbed a broken-down escalator which led up to the road lined with shops. Hagrid was so huge that he parted the crowd easily. All Harry had to do was keep close behind him. They passed bookshops and music stores, hamburger bars and cinemas, but nowhere that looked as if it could give you a magic wand. This was just an ordinary street full of ordinary people. Could there really
be piles of wizard gold buried miles beneath them? Were there really shops that sold spellbooks and broomsticks? Might this be some huge joke that the Dursleys had cooked up? If Harry hadn't known that the Dursleys had no sense of humour, he might have thought so. Yet somehow, even though everything Hagrid had told him so far was unbelievable, Harry couldn't help trusting. "This is it," said Hagrid, coming to a halt. "The Leaky Cauldron. It's a famous place." It was a tiny, grubby-looking pub. Hagrid hadn't pointed it out. Harry wouldn't have noticed it was there. Hurrying by didn't glance at it. Their eyes slid from the big bookshop on one side to the record shop on the other, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron at all. In fact, Harry had the most peculiar feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. Before he could mention this, Hagrid had steered him inside. For a famous place, it was very dark and shabby. A few old women were sitting in a corner, drinking tiny glasses of sherry. One of them was smoking a long pipe. A little man in a top hat was talking to the old barman, who was quite bald and looked like a gummy walnut. The low buzz of chatter stopped when they walked in. Everyone seemed to know Hagrid. They waved and smiled at him, and the barman reached in. "The usual, Hagrid." "Can't, Tom. I'm on Hogwarts business," said Hagrid, clapping his great hand on Harry's shoulder and making Harry's knees buckle. "Good Lord," said the barman, peering at Hagrid. "Is this... can this be?" The Leaky Cauldron had suddenly completely still and silent. "Bless my soul," whispered the old barman. "Harry Potter. What an honour." He hurried down the bar, rushed towards Harry, and seized his hand, tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter. Welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realising it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scrape of chairs, and next moment, Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the Leaky Cauldron. "Doris Crookford, Mr. Potter! Can't believe I'm meeting you at last. So proud, Mr. Potter. I'm just so proud. I've always wanted to shake your hand. I'm all of a flutter." "Delighted, Mr. Potter. Just can't tell you. Diggle's the name. Daedalus Diggle." "I've seen you before," said Harry, as Daedalus Diggle's top hat fell off in his excitement. "You bowed to me once in the shop." "He remembers!" cried Daedalus Diggle, looking round at everyone. "Did you hear that? He remembers me!" Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crookford came back for more. A pale young man made his way forward, very nervously. His eyes was twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry, Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." Stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. "Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you." "What sort of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" "The defense against the dark arts," muttered Professor, as though he'd rather not think about it. "Not that you needed a Potter." He laughed nervously. "You'll be get all your equipment, I suppose. I've got to pick up a new book myself." He looked terrified at the very thought. But the others wouldn't let Professor Quirrell keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from them all. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard over the babble. "Must get on. Lots to buy. Come on, Harry." Doris Crookford took Harry's hand one last time, and Hagrid led them through the bar and out into a small walled courtyard, where there was nothing but a dustbin and a few weeds. Hagrid grinned at Harry. "Told you, didn't I? Told you was famous. And Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling." "Is he always that nervous?" "Oh yeah, poor bloke. Brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out of books, but then he took a year off to get some first-hand experience. You see, he met vampires in the Black Forest. There was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. Scared of the students through his own subject. Now, where's my umbrella?" Vampires? Hags? Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting bricks in the wall above the dustbin. "3 up, 2 across. Stand back, Harry." He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered, wriggled. In the middle, a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider. A second later, they were facing enough even for Hagrid. An archway onto a cobbled street which twisted and turned out of sight.
"Welcome,"
said Hagrid.
"to Diagon Alley."
He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped free. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw the archway shrink instantly back in solid wall. The sun shone brightly on a stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons, all sizes, copper, brass, pewter, silver, self-stirring, collapsible, said a sign hanging over them.
"Yeah, you'll be needing one,"
said Hagrid.
"but we gotta get your money first."
Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying things at once. The shops, the things outside them, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside an apothecary's was shaking her head as they passed, saying, "Dragon liver, 17 sickles an ounce. They're mad." A low, soft hooting came from a dark shop with a sign saying, "Aelop's Owl Emporium, tawny, screech, barn, brown and snowy." Several boys of about Harry's age had their noses pressed up against the window with broomsticks in it. "Look," Harry heard one of them say, "the new Nimbus 2000, first ever." There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes, and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel's eyes, tottering piles of spellbooks, quills and rolls of parts, potion bottles, globes of the moon.
"Gringotts,"
said Hagrid. They had reached a snowy white building which towered over the other little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold, was...
"Yeah, that's a goblin,"
said Hagrid as they walked up the white stone steps towards him. The goblin was about a head shorter than Harry, a swarthy, clever face, a pointed beard, and, Harry noticed, very long fingers and feet. He bowed as they walked inside. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words engraved upon them. "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there."
"Like I said, you'd be had to try and rob it,"
said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and they were in a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins lay stalls behind a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins on scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people out of these. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter.
"Morning,"
said Hagrid to a free goblin.
"We'd come to take some money out of Mr. Harry Potter's safe."
"You have his key, sir?"
"Got it here somewhere,"
said Hagrid, as he started emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of mouldy dog biscuits over the goblin's book of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on their right weighing a pile of rubies as big as glowing coals.
"Got it,"
said Hagrid at last, holding up a tiny golden key. The goblin looked at it closely. "That seems to be in order."
"And I've also got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore,"
Hagrid importantly, throwing out his chest.
"It's about you-know-what in Vault 713.
The goblin read the letter carefully. "Very well," he said, handing it back to Hagrid. "Have someone take you down to both vaults. Griphook." Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed all the dog biscuits back inside his pockets, he and Harry followed Griphook towards one of the doors leading off the hall. "What's the you-know-what in Vault 713? Harry asked.
"Can't tell you that,"
said Hagrid mysteriously.
"Very secret. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's trusted me. More than my job's worth to tell you that."
He held the doors open for them. Harry, who had expected more marble, was surprised. They were in a narrow stone passageway, lit with flaming torches. It sloped steeply downwards, and there were little railway tracks on the floor. And a small cart came hurtling up the tracks towards them. They climbed in, with some difficulty, and were off. At first they just hurtled through a maze of twisting passages. Harry tried to remember. Left, right, left, middle fork, right, left. But it was impossible. The rattling cart seemed to know its own way, because Griphook wasn't steering. Harry's eyes stung as the cold air rushed past them, but he kept wide open. He thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of the passage and twisted around to see if it was a dragon, but too late. They plunged even deeper, passing an underground lake where huge stalactites and stalagmites grew on the floor. "I never know," Harry called to Hagrid over the noise of the cart. "What's the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite?"
One goes up, one goes down.
Stalagmite's got an M in it, said Hagrid. And don't ask me questions, Jake. I'm gonna be sick.
He did look very green. And when the cart stood last beside a small door in the passage wall, Hagrid got out and had to lean against the wall to stop his knees trembling. Griphook unlocked the door. Green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts.
All yours,
Smiled Hagrid. All Harry's. It was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this, or they'd have had it from him faster than blinking. How often had they complained how much Harry cost them to keep? And all the time there had been a small fortune buried deep under London. Hagrid helped Harry pile some of it into a bag.
The gold ones are galleons, he explained. 17 silver shekels to a galleon and 29 nuts to a shekel. Right? That should be enough for a couple of terms. We'll keep the rest safe for you.
He turned to Griphook.
Vote 713 now, please. And can we go more slowly?
1 speed only, said Griphook. They were going even deeper now and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurtled round tight corners. They went rattling over an underground ravine, and Harry leant over the side to try and see what was down at the dark bottom. Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. Vault 713 had no keyhole.
Stand back,
said Griphook importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long arms, and it simply melted away.
If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped in there,
said Griphook. How often do you check to see if anyone's inside? Harry asked.
Once every 10 years,
said Griphook, with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside this top security vault, Harry was sure, and he leapt forward eagerly, expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very least. But at first, he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped up in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up and tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what it was, but knew to ask.
Come on back to this infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way back. It's best to keep my mouth shut,
said Hagrid. One wild cart ride later, they stood blinking in the sunlight outside Gringotts. Harry didn't know where to run first now that he had a bag full of money. He didn't have to know how many galleons were to a pound to know that he was holding more money than he'd had in his whole life. More money than even Dudley had ever had.
Might as well get your...
said Hagrid, nodding towards Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions.
Listen, Harry, would you mind if we slipped off for a pick-me-up in a leaky cauldron? I hate them Gringotts carts.
He did still look a bit sick, so Harry entered Madame Malkin's shop alone, feeling nervous. Madame Malkin was a squat, smiling witch dressed all in mauve. "Hogwarts, dear," she said, when Harry started to speak. "Got the lot here. Another young man being fitted up just now, in fact." In the back of the shop, with a pale, pointed face, was standing on a footstool, while a second witch pinned up his long robes. Madame Malkin stood Harry on the stool next to him, slipped the long robe over his head, and began to pin it to the right length. "Hello," said the boy. "Hogwarts too?" "Yes," said Harry. "My father's next door buying my books, and my mother's up the street looking at wands," said the boy. He had a bored, drawling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why this year's can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one, and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry was strongly reminded of Dudley. "Have you got your own broom?" the boy went on. "No," said Harry. "Play Quidditch at all?" "No," Harry said again, wondering what on earth Quidditch could be. "I do. Mother says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say I agree. No one has you being yet?" "No," said Harry, feeling more stupid by the minute. Well, no one really knows until they get there. But I know I'll be in Slytherin. All our family have been. Imagine being a Hufflepuff. I think I'd leave. Wouldn't you? Said Harry, wishing he could say something a bit more interesting. I say, look at that man, said the boy suddenly. Hagrid was standing there, grinning at Harry, pointing at 2 large ice creams to show he couldn't come in. That's Hagrid, said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. He works at Hogwarts. Oh, said the boy. I've heard of him. He's sort of a servant, isn't he? He's a gamekeeper, said Harry. He was liking the boy less and less every... Yes, exactly. I heard he's sort of savage. Lives in a hut in the school grounds, and every now and then he gets drunk. Tries to do magic and ends up setting fire to his bed. I think he's brilliant, Harry coldly. Do you? Said the boy with a slight sneer. Why is he with you? Where are your parents? They're dead, said Harry shortly. He didn't feel much like going into the matter with this boy. Sorry, said the other, not sounding sorry at all. But they were our kind, weren't they? They were a witch and wizard, if that's what you mean. I really don't think they should let the others sort in, do you? They're just not the same. Brought up to know our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get a letter. Imagine. I think they should keep it in the old wizarding families. What's your surname, anyway? Before Harry could answer, Madam Malkin said, That's you done, my dear. And Harry, not sorry, refused to stop talking to the boy, hopped down from the footstool. Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose, said the drawling boy. Harry was rather quiet as he ate the ice cream Hagrid had bought him. Chocolate and raspberry with chocolates. What's up? Said Hagrid. Nothing, Harry lied. They stopped to buy parchment and quills. Harry cheered up a bit when he found a bottle of Iller as he wrote. When they had left the shop, he said, Hagrid, what's Quidditch? Blimey, Harry, I keep forgetting how little you know. Not knowing about Quidditch. Don't make me feel worse, said Harry. He told Hagrid about the Pale Boy and Madam Malkins. And he said people from Muggle families shouldn't even be allowed in. You're not from a Muggle family. We've known who you were. He's grown up knowing your name if his parents are wizarding folk, or in the Leaky Cauldron. Anyway, what does he know about it? Some of the best I ever were the only ones with magic in them in the long line of Muggles. But your mum, what was she at for a sister? So what is Quidditch? It's our sport. It's like football in the Muggle world. Everybody follows Quidditch. Played up in the air on broomsticks, and there's 4 balls, so I had to explain the rules. And what's a Slytherin and Hufflepuff? Schoolhouses. There's 4. Everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of old duffers, but... Bet I'm in Hufflepuff, said Harry gleefully. Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin, said Hagrid darkly. Not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. You know who was one. Valerie, you know who was at Hogwarts? Years and years ago, said Hagrid. They bought Harry's schoolbooks in a shop called Flourish and Blots, where the shelves were stacked to the ceiling, with just paving stones bound in leather, books the size of postage stamps, covers of silk, books full of peculiar symbols, and a few books with nothing in them at all. Even he, who never read anything, would have been wild to get his hands on some of these. Hagrid had to drag Harry away from curses and counter-curses, bewitch your friends and befuddle your enemies with the latest revenges, hair loss, jelly legs, tongue-tying, and much, much more, by Professor Vindictus Viridian. I was trying to find out how to curse Dudley. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but you're not to use magic in the Muggle world except in very special circumstances, said Hagrid. And anyway, you couldn't work any of them curses yet. You'll need a lot more study before you get to that level. Hagrid wouldn't let Harry buy a solid gold cauldron either. He says pewter on your list. But they got a nice set of scales for weighing potion ingredients and a collapsible brass telescope. They then visited the apothecary's, which was fascinating enough to make up for its horrible smell, a mixture of bad eggs and rotted cabbages. Barrels of slimy stuff stood on the floor, jars of herbs, dried roots, and bright powders lined the walls. Bundles of feathers, strings of fangs, and snarled claws hung from the ceiling. While Hagrid asked the man behind the counter for a supply of some basic potion ingredients, Harry himself examined silver unicorn horns at 21 galleons each, and minuscule glittery black beetle eyes, 5 nuts a scoop. Inside the apothecary's, Hagrid checked Harry's list again.
Just your wand left. Oh yeah, and I still haven't forgotten your birthday present.
Harry felt himself go red. You don't have to.
I know I don't have to. You what? I'll get your animal. Not a toad. Toads went out of fashion years ago. You'll be laughed at. And I don't like cats. They make me sneeze. I'll get you an owl. All the kids want owls. They're dead useful. Carry a pulse and everything.
20 minutes later, they left Ilop's Owl Emporium, which had been dark and full of rustling and flickering, jeweled bright eyes. Harry now carried a large cage which held a beautiful snowy owl, fast asleep with her head under her wing. Stopped stammering his thanks, sounding just like Professor Quirrell.
Don't, Jeanette, said Hagrid gruffly. Don't expect you've had a lot of presents from them Dursleys. Just Ollivanders left now. Only place for wands, Ollivanders. That's wand.
A magic wand. This was what Harry was really looking forward to. The last shop was narrow and shabby. Peeling gold letters over the door read, Ollivanders, makers of wands since 382 BC. A single wand lay on a fake purple cushion in the dusty window. A tinkling bell rang somewhere in the depths of the shop as they stepped inside. It was a tiny place, except for the single spindly chair which Hagrid sat on to wait. Harry felt strangely as though he had entered a very strict library. He swallowed a lot of new questions which had just occurred to him, and looked instead at the thousands of narrow boxes right up to the ceiling. For some reason, the back of his neck prickled. The very dust and silence in here seemed to tingle with some secret magic. "Good afternoon," said a soft voice. Hagrid must have jumped too, because there was a loud crunching noise and he got quickly off the spindly chair. An old man was standing before them, his wide, pale eyes shining like moons through the gloom of the shop. "Hello," very awkwardly. "Ah, yes," said the man. Yes, I thought I'd be seeing you soon, Harry Potter." It wasn't a question. "You have your mother's eyes. Yesterday she was in here herself, buying her first wand. 1/4 inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work." Mr. Ollivander moved closer to Harry. Wished he would blink. Those silvery eyes were a bit creepy. "Your father, on the other hand, favoured a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable, a little more power and excellent for transfiguration. When I say your father favoured it, it's really the wand that chooses with, of course." Mr. Ollivander had come so close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. Harry could see himself reflected in those misty eyes. "And that's where—" Mr. Ollivander touched the lightning scar on Harry's forehead with a long white finger. "Sorry to say I sought the wand that did it," he said softly. 13.5 inches. You powerful one, very powerful, and in the wrong hands. If I'd have known what that wand was going out into the world to do." He shook his head and then, to Harry's relief, spotted Hagrid. Rubius Hagrid, how nice to see you again. Oak, 18 inches, rather bendy, wasn't it?" "It was, sir, yes," said Hagrid. "Good wand, that one. But I suppose they snapped it in half when you got it spelled," said Mr. Ollivander, suddenly stern. "Yes, they did," said Hagrid, shuffling his feet. "I've still got the pieces, though," he added brightly. "But you don't use them," said Mr. Ollivander sharply. "Oh, no, sir," said Hagrid quickly. He gripped his pink umbrella very tightly as he spoke. Said Mr. Ollivander, giving Hagrid a piercing look. "Well now, Mr. Potter, let me see." He pulled a long tape measure with silver out of his pocket. "Which is your wand arm?" Well, I'm right-handed," said Harry. "Hold out your arm. That's it." He measured Harry from shoulder to finger, then wrist to elbow, shoulder to floor, knee to armpit, and round his head. As he measured, he said, "Every Ollivander wand has a core of a power powerful magical substance, Mr. Potter. We use unicorn hairs. Phoenix tell the heartstrings of dragons. No two Ollivander wands are the same, just as no two unicorns, dragons, or phoenixes are quite the same. And of course, you will never get such good results with another wizard. Harry suddenly realized that the tape measure was measuring between his nostrils was doing this on its own. Mr. Ollivander was flitting around the shelves taking down boxes. "That will do," he said, and the tape measure crumpled into a heap on the floor. "Right then, Miss Potter, try this one. Beechwood and dragon heartstring. 9 inches, nice and flexible. Just take it and give it." Harry took the wand and, feeling foolish, waved it a bit. But Mr. Ollivander snatched it out of his hand almost at once. "A maple and phoenix feather. 7 inches, quite whippy. Try." Harry tried, but he had hardly raised the wand when it too was snatched back by Mr. Ollivander. No. Here, ebony and unicorn hair. 8.5 inches. Springy. Go on, try it out." Harry tried. He had no idea what Mr. Ollivander was waiting for. The pile of tried wands was mounting higher and higher on the spindly chair. But the more wands Mr. Ollivander pulled from the shelves, the happier he seemed to become. "Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry. We'll find the perfect matches somewhere. I wonder now. Yes, why not? Unusual question. Holly and phoenix feather. 11 inches. Nice and supple." Harry took the wand. He felt a sudden warmth in his fingers. Raised the wand above his head, brought it swishing down through the dusty air, and a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like a firework, tossing spots of light onto the walls. Hagrid whooped and clapped, and Mr. Ollivander cried, "Oh, bravo! Yes, indeed. Oh, very good. Well. How curious. How curious." He put Harry's wand back into its box and wrapped it in brown paper, still muttering, "Curious. "Sorry," said Harry. "What's curious?" Mr. Ollivander fixed Harry with his pale stare. "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose feather is in your wand gave another feather. Just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand, when its brother gave you that scar." Harry swallowed. "Yes, 13.5 inches. Curious indeed how these things happen. The wand is the wizard, remember? I think we must expect great thing from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes. Great." The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky as Harry and Hagrid made their way back down Diagon Alley. Back through the wall, back through the leaky cauldron, now empty. Harry didn't speak at all as they walked down the road. He didn't even notice how much people were gulping at them underground, laden as they were with all their funny-shaped packages, with the sleeping snowy owl on Harry's lap. Up another escalator, out into Paddington Station. Harry only realised where they were when Hagrid tapped him on the shoulder. "Got time for a bite to eat your tree leaves?" he said. He bought Harry a hamburger, and they sat down on plastic seats to eat them. Harry kept looking around. Everything looked so strange somehow. "You all right, Harry? You're very quiet," said Hagrid. Harry wasn't sure he could explain. He'd just had the best birthday of his life, and yet he chewed his hamburger, trying to find the words. "Everyone thinks I'm special," he said at last. "All those people in the leaky cauldron, Professor Quirrell, Mr. Ollivander. But I don't know anything about magic at all. How can I expect great things? I'm famous, and I can't be famous for. I don't know what happened when the night my parents died." Hagrid leant across the table. Behind the wild beard and eyebrows, he wore a very kind smile. "Don't worry, you'll learn fast enough. Everyone starts at the beginning at Hogwarts.
You'll be just fine. Just be yourself. I know it's hard. You've been singled out, and that's always hard. But you'll have a great time at Hogwarts. I did. Still a fact.
Hagrid helped Harry onto the train that would take him back to the Dursleys, then handed him an envelope.
Your ticket for Hogwarts, he said. 1st of September, King's Cross. It's all in your ticket. Any problems with the Dursleys, send me a letter when you're out. You'll know where to find me. See you soon, Harry.
The train pulled out of the station. Harry wanted to watch Hagrid until he was out of sight. He rose in his seat and pressed his nose against the window as he blinked, and had gone. Chapter 6. The journey from platform 9 3/4. Harry's last month with the Dursleys wasn't fun.
This is my favorite part
True,
of the
Dudley
book.
was now Harry. He wouldn't stay in the same room, while Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon didn't shut Harry's cupboard, force him to do anything, or shout at him. In fact, they didn't speak to him at all. Half terrified, half furious, as though any chair with Harry in it was empty. Although this was an improvement in ways, it did become a bit depressing after a while. Harry kept to his room, with his new owl for company. He had decided to call her Hedwig, a name he had found in a history of magic. His books were very interesting. He lay on his bed reading late into the night, Hedwig swooping in and out of the open window as she pleased. It was Aunt Petunia didn't come in to hoover anymore, because Hedwig kept bringing back dead mice. Every night before he went to sleep, Harry ticked off another day on a piece of paper he had pinned to the wall, counting down to September the 1st. On the last day of August, he thought he'd better speak to his aunt and uncle about getting to King's Cross Station next day, so he went down to the living room, where they were watching a quiz show on television. He cleared his throat to let them know he was there, and Dudley screamed and ran from the room. Uncle Vernon? Uncle Vernon grunted to show he was listening. I need to be at King's Cross tomorrow to go to Hogwarts. Uncle Vernon grunted again. Would it be all right if you gave me a lift? Grunt. Harry supposed that meant yes. Thank you. He was about to go back upstairs when Uncle Vernon actually spoke.
Funny way to get to a wizard's school. Magic carpets all got punctures, have they?
Harry didn't say anything.
Where is this school, anyway?
I don't know, said Harry, realising this for the first time. He pulled the ticket hanging out of his pocket. I just take the train from platform 3/4 at 11 o'clock, he read. His aunt and uncle stared.
Platform what?
9 3/4.
Don't talk rubbish,
said Uncle Vernon.
There's no platform 9 3/4.
It's on my ticket,
Barking,
said Uncle Vernon.
howling mad, the lot of them. You'll see, just you wait. All right, we'll take you to King's Cross. We're going up to London tomorrow anyway, or don't bother.
Why are you going to London? Harry asked, trying to keep things friendly.
Taking Dudley to the hospital.
Growled Uncle.
Got to have that ratty tail removed before he goes to Smeltings.
Harry woke at 5 o'clock the next morning and was too excited and nervous to go back to sleep. He got up and pulled on his jeans because he didn't want to walk in his wizard robes. He'd change on the train. He checked his Hogwarts list again to make sure he had everything he needed, saw that Hedwig was shut safely in her cage, and then paced the room, waiting for the Dursleys to get up. Later, Harry's huge, heavy trunk had been loaded into the Dursleys' car. Aunt Petunia had talked Dudley into sitting next to Harry, and they had set off. They reached King's Cross at 10:30. Uncle Vernon dumped Harry's trunk onto a trolley and wheeled it into the station for him. Harry thought this was strange kind, until Uncle Vernon stopped dead, facing the platforms with a nasty grin on his face.
Well, there you are, boy. Platform 10. Your platform should be somewhere in the middle, but they don't seem to have built it yet, do they?
He was quite right, of course. There was a big plastic number 9 over one platform, and a big plastic over the one next to it. And in the middle, nothing at all.
Have a good time,
said Uncle Vernon, with an even nastier smile. He left without another word. Harry turned and saw them away. All three of them were laughing. Harry's mouth went rather dry. What on earth was he going to do? He was starting to attract a lot of funny looks because of Hedwig. He'd have to ask someone. He stopped the passing guard, but didn't dare mention platform 9 3/4. The guard had never heard of Hogwarts, and when Harry couldn't even tell him what part of the country it was in, he started to get annoyed. So Harry was being stupid on purpose. Getting desperate, he asked for the train that left at 11 o'clock, but the guard said there wasn't one. In the end, the guard strode away, muttering about us. Harry was now trying hard not to panic. According to the large clock over the arrivals board, he had 10 minutes left to get on the train to Hogwarts, and he had no idea how to do it. He was stranded in the middle of a station with a trunk he could hardly lift, a pocket full of his money, and a large owl. Hagrid must have forgotten to tell him something he had to do, like tapping the third brick on the left to get into the... He wondered if he should get out his wand and start tapping the ticket box between platforms 9 and 10. At that moment, a group of people passed by just behind him, and he caught a few words of what they were saying. With muggles, of course. Harry swung round. The speaker was a plump woman who was talking to 4 boys, all with flaming red hair. Each of them was pushing a trunk like Harry's in front of him, and they had an owl. Heart hammering, Harry pushed his trolley after them. They stopped, and so did he, just near enough to hear what they were saying. Now, what was the platform number? Said the boy's mother. 9, piped the small girl, also red-headed, who was holding her hand. Mum, can't I go? You're not old enough, Ginny. Now be quiet. All right, Percy, you go first. What looked like the old march towards platforms 9 and 10. Harry watched, careful not to blink and missed it. But just as the boy reached a divide between the 2 platforms, a large crowd of tourists came swarming in front of him, and by the time they had cleared away, the boy had vanished. Fred, you next, the bump woman said. I'm not Fred, I'm George, said the boy. Honestly, woman, call yourself our mother. Can't you tell I'm George? Sorry, George, dear. Only joking. I am Fred, said the boy, and off he went. His twin called after him to hurry up, and he must have done, because a second later he had gone. But how had he done it? Now the third brother was walking briskly towards the ticket barrier. He was awkward, and then, quite suddenly, he wasn't anywhere. Nothing else for it. Excuse me, Harry said to the plump woman. Hello, dear, she said. First time at Hogwarts? Ron's. She pointed at the last and youngest of her sons. He was tall, thin, and gangling, with freckles, big hands and feet, and a long nose. Yes, said Harry. The thing is, the thing I don't know how to get onto the platform, she said kindly, and Harry nodded. Not to worry, she said. All you have to do is walk straight at the barriers between platforms 9 and 10. And don't be scared, you'll crash into it. That's very important. Best at a bit of a run if you're nervous. Go on, go now before Ron. Okay, said Harry. He pushed his trolley round the barrier. It looked very solid. He started to walk towards it. People jostled him on their way to platforms 9 and 10. Harry walked more quickly. He was going to smash right into that ticket box, and then he'd be in trouble. Leaning forward on his trolley, he broke into a heavy run. The barrier was nearer and nearer. He wouldn't be able to stop. The trolley was out of control. He was a foot away. He closed his eyes, ready for the crash. It didn't come. He kept on running. He opened his eyes. A scarlet steam engine was waiting next to a platform packed with people. A sign overhead said Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock, behind him, and saw a wrought iron archway where the ticket box had been, with the words platform 9 and 3/4 on it. He had done it. Smoke from the engine drifted over the heads of the chattering, while cats of every colour wound here and there between their legs, and hooted to each other in a disgruntled sort of way over the babble and the scraping of heavy trunks. The first few carriages were already packed with students, some hanging out of the window to talk to their families, some fighting over seats. Harry pushed his trolley off down the platform in search of an empty seat. He passed a round-faced boy who was saying, "Gran, I've lost my toad again." "Oh, Neville," he heard the old woman sigh. A boy with dreadlocks was surrounded by a small crowd. "Give us a look, Lee. Go on." The boy lifted the lid of a box in his arms, and the people around him shrieked as something inside poked out a long, hairy leg. He pressed on through the crowd until he found an empty compartment near the end of the train. He put Hedwig inside first, and then started to shove and heave his trunk towards the train door. He tried to lift it up the steps, but could hardly raise one end, and twice he dropped painfully on his foot. On the hand, it was one of the red-haired twins he'd followed through the ticket box. "Yes, please," Harry panted. "Oi, Fred, come here and help." With the twins' help, Harry's trunk at last tucked away in a corner of the compartment. "Thanks," said Harry, pushing his sweaty hair out of his eyes. "What's that?" said one of the twins suddenly, pointing at Harry's lightning scar. "Blimey," said the other twin. "Are you?" "He is," said the first twin. "Aren't you?" he added to Harry. "What?" said Harry. "Harry Potter," to the twins. "Oh, him," said Harry. "I mean, yes, I am." The two boys gawped at him, and Harry felt himself going red. Then, to his relief, came floating through the train's open door. "Fred! George! Are you—" "Coming, Mum." With a last look at Harry, the twins hopped off the train. Harry sat down next to the window where, half hidden, he could watch the red-haired family on the platform and hear what they were saying. Their mother had just taken out her handkerchief. "Ron, you've got something on your nose." The youngest boy tried to jerk out of the way, but she grabbed him and began rubbing the end of his nose. "Clear off!" He wriggled free. "Ah, Zickle Ronnie got on his nosy," said one of the twins. "Shut up," said Ron. "Where's Percy?" said their mother. The oldest boy came striding into sight. He had already changed into his big black Hogwarts robes, and Harry noticed a shiny silver badge on his chest with the letter P on it. "Can't stay long, Mother," he said. "Up front, the prefects have got 2 compartments to themselves." "Oh, you're a prefect, Percy," said one of the twins with an air of great surprise. "You should have said something. We had here." "Hang on, I think I remember him saying something about it," said the other twin. "Once, or twice, a minute, or summer." "Oh, shut up," said Percy the prefect. "How come Percy new robes anyway?" "Because he's a prefect," said the fondly. "All right, dear. Well, have a good term. Send me an hour when you get there." She kissed Percy on the cheek and he left. Then she turned to the twin. "Now, you two, this year you behave yourselves. One more out telling me you've blown up a toilet or..." "Blown up a toilet? We've never blown up a toilet." "Great idea, though. Thanks, mate." "It's not funny. Look after Ron." "Don't worry, Ickle Ronnie cleans his soap with us." "Shut up," said Ron again. He was almost as tall as the twins already, and his nose was still where his mother had rubbed it. "Hey, Mum, guess what? Guess who we just met on the train?" Harry leant back quickly so they couldn't see him looking. "You know that black-haired boy who was near us at the station? Know who he is?" "Who?" "Harry Potter." Harry heard the little girl's voice. "Mum, can I go on the train and see him? Mum, oh please." "You've already seen him, Ginny. And the poor boy isn't something you goggle at in a zoo. Is he, Fred? How do you know?" "Asked him. Saw his scar. It's there, like lightning." "Poor dear. No wonder he was alone. I wondered. He was ever so polite when he asked how to get onto the platform." "Never mind that. Do you think he remembers what you know who looks like?" Their mother suddenly became very stern. "I forbid you to ask him, Fred. No, don't you dare. As though he needs reminding of Dad on his first day." "All right, keep your hair on." A whistle sounded. Their mother said, and the 3 boys clambered onto the train. They leant out of the window for her to kiss them goodbye, and their younger sister began to cry. Ginny, we'll send you loads of owls. We'll send you a Hogwarts toilet seat. George! Only joking, Mum. The train began to move. Harry saw the boy's mother waving, and their sister, half laughing, half crying, running to keep up with the train until it gathered too much speed. Then she fell back and waved. Harry watched the girl and her mother disappear as the train rounded the corner. Houses flashed past the window. Harry felt a great leap of excitement. He didn't know what he was going to, but it had to be better than what he was leaving behind. The door of the compartment slid open, and the youngest red-headed boy came in. Anyone sit? He asked, pointing at the seat opposite Harry. Everywhere else full. Harry shook his head and the boy sat down. He glanced at Harry, and then looked quickly out the window, pretending he hadn't looked. Harry saw he had a black mark on his nose. Hey, Ron. The twins were back. Listen, we're going down the middle of the train. Lee Jordan's got a giant tarantula down there. Right, mumbled Ron. Harry, said the other twin. Did we introduce ourselves? Fred and George Weasley. And this is Ron, our brother. See you later then. Bye, said Harry and Ron. The twins slid the compartment door shut behind them. Are you really Harry Potter? Ron blurted out. Harry nodded. Oh, well, I thought it might have been one of Fred and George's jokes, said Ron. Have you really got, you know? He pointed at Harry's head. Harry pulled back his fringe to show the lightning scar. Ron stared. So that's where you know who? Yes, said Harry, but I can't remember it. Nothing, said Ron. Well, I remember a lot of green light, but nothing else. Wow, said Ron. He sat and stared at Harry for a few moments. Then, as though he had suddenly realised what he was doing, he looked quickly at her again. Are all your family wizards? Asked Harry, who found it just as interesting as Ron found him. Yeah, I think so, said Ron. I think Mum's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we'll never talk about him. So you must know loads of magic already. The Weasleys were clearly one of those old wizarding families the Pale Boy in Diagon Alley had talked about. I heard you went to live with Muggles, said Ron. What are they like? Horrible. Well, not all of them. My aunt and uncle and cousin are, though. Wish I'd had 3 wizard brothers. 5, said Ron. For some reason, he was looking gloomy. I'm in our family to go to Hogwarts. Could say I've got a lot to live up to. Bill and Charlie have already left. Bill was head boy, and Charlie was captain of Quidditch. And now Percy's the prefect. Fred and George mess around a lot, but they get good marks, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone expects me to do as well as others. And if I do, no big deal, because they did it first. You never get anything new either with 5 brothers. I've got Bill's old robes, Charlie's old wand, Percy's old rat. Ron reached inside his jacket and pulled out a fat rat which was asleep. His name's Scabbers, and he's useless. He hardly ever wakes up. Percy got an out from my dad for being made prefect, but they couldn't afford. I got Scabbers instead. Ron's ears pink. He seemed to think he'd said too much because he went back to staring out the window. Harry didn't think there was anything wrong with not being able to afford an owl. He'd never had any money in his life until a month ago, and he told Ron so, about having to wear Dudley's old clothes and never getting proper birthday presents. This seemed to cheer Ron up. And until Hagrid told me, I didn't know anything about a wizard, or about my parents, or Voldemort. Ron gasped. What? Said Harry. You said you know whose name, said Ron, sounding both shocked and impressed. I'd have thought you of all people. But I'm not trying to be brave or anything, saying the name, said Harry. I never knew you shouldn't. See what I mean? I've got loads to learn. I bet, he added, voicing for the first time something that had been worrying him a lot lately. I bet I'm the worst in the class. You won't be. There's loads of people that come from Muggle families, and they learn quick enough. While they were talking, the train had carried them out of London. Now they were speeding past fields full of cows and sheep. They were quiet for a time, watching the fields and lanes flick past. 12:30, there was a great clattering outside in the corridor, and a smiling, dimpled woman slid back their door and said, "Anything off the trolley, dears?" Harry, who hadn't had any breakfast, leapt to his feet. But Ron's ears went pink again. He muttered that he'd brought sandwiches. Harry went out into the corridor. He had never had any money for sweets with the Dursleys, and now that he had pockets rattling with silver, he was ready to buy as many Mars bars as he could carry. But Storm didn't have any Mars bars. What she did have were Bertie Bott's every flavour beans, Drooble's best blowing gum, chocolate frogs, puppies, cauldron cakes, licorice wands, and a number of other strange things Harry had never seen in his life. Not wanting to miss anything, he got some of everything, and paid the woman 11 silver sickles and 7 bronze nuts. Ron stared as Harry brought it all back into the compartment and tipped it onto an empty seat. "Hungry, are you?" "Starving," said Harry, taking a large bite out of pumpkin pasty. Ron had taken out a lumpy package and unwrapped it. There were 4 sandwiches in there. He pulled one of them apart and said, "She always forgets I don't like corned beef." "Swap you for one of these," said Harry, holding up a pasty. "Go on." "You don't want this. It's all dry," said Ron. "She hasn't got much time," he added quickly. "You know, with 5 of us." "Go on, have a pasty," said Harry, who had never had anything to share before, or indeed anyone to share it with. It was a nice feeling sitting there with Ron, eating there through all Harry's pasties and cakes. Sandwiches lay forgotten. "What are these?" Harry asked Ron, holding up a pack of chocolate frogs. "They're not really frogs, are they?" He was starting to feel that nothing would surprise him. "No," said Ron. "But see what the card is? I'm missing a gripper." "What?" "Oh, of course, you wouldn't know. Things have cards inside them, you know, to collect. Famous witches and wizards. Got about 500, but I haven't got a gripper or Ptolemy." Harry unwrapped his chocolate frog and picked up the card. It showed a man's face. He wore glasses, had a long crooked nose and flowing silver hair, beard and a moustache. Underneath the picture was the name Albus Dumbledore. "So this is Dumbledore," said Harry. "Don't tell me you've never heard of," said Ron. "You'll have a frog. I might get a gripper." "Thanks." Harry turned over his card and read, "Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts, considered by many as wizard of modern times. Professor Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling." He turned the card back over and saw, to his astonishment, that Dumbledore's face had disappeared. "He's gone!" "Well, you can't expect him to hang around all day, Ron. He'll be back." "No, I've got Morgana again. I've got a of her. You want it? You can start collecting." Ron's eyes strayed to the pile of chocolate frogs waiting to be unwrapped. "Help yourself," said Harry. "But in, you know, the Muggle world, people just stay put in photos." "Do they? What, they don't move at all?" Ron sounded amazed. "Weird." He stared as Dumbledore sidled back into the picture on his card and gave him a small smile. Ron was more interested in eating the frogs than looking at famous witches and wizards cards, but Harry couldn't keep his eyes off them. Soon, he had not only Anne Morgana, but Hengist of Woodcroft, Alberic Grunion, Sike, Paracilius, and Merlin. He finally tore his eyes away from the Druidess Cleodna, who was scratching her nose, to open a bag of Bertie-flavoured beans. "You want to be careful with those," Ron warned Harry. "When they say every flavour, they mean every flavour. You know, you get all the ordinary ones like chocolate and peppermint and marmalade, but then you can get and liver and tripe. George reckons he had a bogey-flavoured one once." Ron picked up a green bean, looked at it carefully, and bit into the corner. "Ah, see? Sprats." They had a good time eating the every flavour beans. Harry got toast, coconut, beans, strawberry, curry, grass, coffee, sardine, and he was even brave enough to nibble the end off a funny grey one that Ron wouldn't touch, which turned out to be pepper. The countryside now flying past the window was becoming wilder. The fields had gone. Now, There were woods, twisting rivers and dark green hills. There was a knock on the door of their compartment, and the round-faced boy passed on platform 9 3/4 came in. He looked tearful. "Sorry," he said, "but have you seen a toad at all?" When they shook their heads, he wailed, "I've lost him. He keeps getting on me." "He'll turn up," said Harry. "Yes," said the boy miserably. "Well, if you see him..." He left. "Don't know why he's so bothered," said Ron. "If I'd brought a toad, I'd lose it. Mind you, I'm all scabbers, so I can't talk." He was still snoozing on Ron's lap. "He might have died, and he wouldn't know the difference," said Ron in disgust. "I tried to turn him yellow yesterday, but the spell didn't work. I'll show you, look." He rummaged around in his trunk and pulled out a very battered-looking wand. It was chipped in places, and something white was glinting at the end. "Unicorn is nearly poking out." He had just raised the wand when the compartment door slid open again. The toadlet was back, but this time he had a girl with him. She was already wearing her new Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad? Neville's lost one," she said. She had a bossy sort of voice, lots of bushy brown hair and large front teeth. "I've already told him we haven't seen it," said Ron. The girl wasn't listening. She was looking at the wand in his hand. "Oh, you doing it? Let's see it then." She sat down. Ron looked taken aback. All right." He cleared his throat. "Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow, this stupid fat rat yellow." He waved his wand, but nothing happened. Scabbers stayed grey and fast asleep. "Are you sure it's a real spell?" said the girl. "Well, it's not very good, is it? I've tried a few simple spells, just for practice. It's all worked for me. Nobody in my family's magic at all. It was ever such a surprise when I got my letter, but I was ever so pleased. Of course, I mean, it's the very best school of witchcraft there is, I've heard. I've learned last set books off by heart. Of course, I just hope it will be enough. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. Who are you?" She said all this very... Harry looked at Ron and was relieved to see by his stunned face that he hadn't learned all the set books off by heart either. "I'm Ron Weasley," Ron muttered. "Harry Potter," said Harry. "Oh," said Hermione. "I know all about you, of course. I've got a few books for background reading. And you're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century." "Am I?" said Harry, feeling dazed. "Goodness, didn't you know? I'd have found out everything I could if it was me," said Hermione. "Do either of you know what house you'll be in? I've been asking, and I hope I'm in Gryffindor. It sounds by far the best. Dumbledore himself was one. But I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too... Anyway, we'd better go and look for Neville's toad. You two had better change, you know. I expect we'll be there soon." And she left, taking the toadless boy with her. "Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it," said Ron. He threw his wand back into his trunk. "Stupid spell. George gave it to me. Bet he knew it was a dud." "What house are your brothers in?" asked Harry. "Gryffindor," said Ron. Glue settling on him again. "Mum and Dad were in it too. I don't know what they'll if I'm not. I don't suppose Ravenclaw would be too bad, but imagine if they put me in Slytherin." "That's the house for... I mean, you know who was in?" "Yeah," said Ron. He flopped back into his seat looking depressed. "You know, I think the end of Scabbers' whiskers are a bit lighter," said Harry, trying to take Ron's mind off houses. "What do your oldest brothers do now anyway?" Harry was wondering what a wizard did once he'd finished school. "Ollie's in Romania studying dragons, and Bill's in Africa doing something for Gringotts," said Ron. "Did you hear about Gringotts? Been all over the Daily Prophet. I suppose you get that with the Muggles. Someone tried to rob a high security vault." Harry stared. "Really? What happened to them?" "Nothing. That's why it's such big news. They haven't been caught. My dad said it must have been a powerful dark wizard to get round Gringotts, but they don't think they took anything. That's what's odd, because everyone gets scared when something like this happens in case you know who's behind it." Harry turned this news over in his mind. He was starting to get a prickle of fear every time you-know-who was mentioned. He supposed this was all part of entering the magical world, but it had been a lot more comfortable saying Voldemort without worrying. "What's your Quidditch team?" I don't know any," Harry confessed. "What?" Ron looked dumbfounded. "Oh, you wait. It's the best game in the world." And he was off, explaining all about the four and the positions of the 7 players, describing famous games he'd been to with his brothers, the broomstick he'd like to get if he had the money. He was just taking Harry through the finer points of the game when the compartment door slid open yet again. But it wasn't Neville, Toadless Boy, or Hermione Granger this time. 3 boys entered, and Harry recognised the middle one at once. It was the Pell Boy from Madame Malkin's robe shop. He was looking at Harry with a lot more interest than he'd shown back in. "Is it true," he said, "they're saying on the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment? So it's you, is it?" "Yes," said Harry. He was looking at the other boys. Both of them were thick-set and extremely mean. Standing either side of the Pell Boy, they looked like bodyguards. "No, this is Crabbe, and this is Goyle," said the Pell Boy carelessly, noticing where Harry was looking. "My name is Malfoy. Draco Malfoy." Ron gave a cough, which might have been hiding a snigger. Draco Malfoy looked at him. "Think my name is funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me all the Weasleys have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford." He turned back to Harry. "You'll soon find out some Wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there." He held out his hand to shake Harry's, but Harry didn't take it. "I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks," he said coolly. Draco Malfoy didn't go red, but a pink tinge appeared in his pale cheeks. "I'd be careful if I were you, Potter," he said slowly. "Unless you're a bit politer, you'll the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them either. Hang around with riff-raff like the Weasleys and that Hagrid, and it'll rub off on you." Both Harry and Ron stood up. Ron's face was as red as his hair. "Say that again," he said. "No, you're going to fight us, are you?" Malfoy sneered. "Unless you get out now," said Harry, more bravely than he felt. Because we're a lot bigger than him or Ron. "But we don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? We've eaten all our food, and you still seem to have some." Goyle reached towards the chocolate frogs. Ron leapt forward, but before he'd so much as touched Goyle let out a horrible yell. Scabbers the rat was hanging off his finger. Sharp little teeth sunk deep into Goyle's knuckle. Crabbe and Malfoy backed away as Goyle swung Scabbers round and round, howling, and when Scabbers nearly flew off and hit the window, all 3 of them disappeared at once. Perhaps they thought there were more rats lurking among the sweets, or perhaps they'd heard footsteps, because a second later, Hermione Granger had come in. "What has been going on?" she said, looking at the sweets all over the floor, and Ron picking up Scabbers by his tail. "Think he's been knocked out?" said to Harry. He looked closer at Scabbers. "No, I don't believe. He's gone back to sleep." And so he had. "You had Malfoy before?" Harry explained about their meeting in Diagon Alley. "I've heard of his family," said Ron darkly. "They were some of the first to come back to our side after you-know-who disappeared. Said they'd been bewitched. My dad doesn't believe it. He says Malfoy's father didn't need an excuse to go over to the side." He turned to Hermione. "Can we help you with something?" "You'd better hurry up and put your robes on. I've just been up with the driver, and he says we're nearly there. You haven't been fighting, have you? You'll be in trouble before we even get there." "Scabbers has been fighting." "Not us," said Ron, scowling at her. "Would you mind leaving while we change?" "All right. I only came in here because people outside are behaving childishly, running up and down the corridors," said Hermione in a sniffy voice. "And you've got dirt on your nose, by the way. Did you know?" Ron glared at her as she left. Harry peered out of the window. It was getting dark. He could see mountains and forests under a deep purple sky. The train did seem to be slowing down. He and Ron took off their jackets and pulled on black robes. Ron's were a bit short for him. He could see his trainers under them. A voice echoed through the train.
We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes' time. Please leave your luggage on the train. It will be taken to the school separately.
Harry's stomach lurched with nerve, and Ron, he saw, looked pale under his freckles. They crammed their pockets with the last of the sweets and joined the crowd thronging the corridor. It slowed right down and finally stopped. People pushed their way towards the and out onto a tiny dark platform. Harry shivered in the cold night air. Then a lamp came bobbing over the heads of the students, and Harry heard a familiar voice.
First years over here. All right there, Harry.
Hagrid's big hairy face beamed over the sea of heads.
Come on, follow me. Any more first years? Mind your step now. First years, follow me.
Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down what seemed to be a steep, narrow path. It was so dark either side of them that Harry thought there must be thick trees there. No one spoke much. Neville, the boy who kept losing his toad, sniffed once or twice.
You get your first sight of Hogwarts in a sack.
Hagrid called over his shoulder.
Just round the bend here.
Loud, ooh. The narrow path opened suddenly onto the edge of a great black lake. Perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkling in the starry sky, a vast castle with many turrets and towers.
Looking forward to a boat,
Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats in the water by the shore. Harry and Ron were followed into their boat by Neville and Hermione.
Everyone in,
shouted Hagrid, who had a boat to himself.
Right then, forward!
Then a fleet of little boats moved off all at once, gliding across the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was silent, staring up at the great castle overhead. It towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood.
Heads down!
Yelled Hagrid as the first boats reached. They all bent their heads, and the little boats carried them through a curtain of ivy which hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel, which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle, until they reached a kind of underground harbour, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles.
Oi, you there! Is this your toad?
Said Hagrid, who was checking the boats as people climbed out of them.
Trevor!
Cried Neville, holding out his hands. Then they clambered up a passageway in the rock after Hagrid's lamp, coming out at last onto smooth, damp grass right in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge oak front door.
Everyone here, you there, still got your toad?
Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. Chapter 7. The Sorting Hat. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robes stood there. She had a very stern face, and Harry's first thought was that this was not someone to cross.
The first years, Professor McGonagall,
said Hagrid. Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here. She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall was so big you could have fitted the whole of the Dursleys' house in it. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led to the upper floors. They followed Professor McGonagall across the flagstone floor. Harry could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from the doorway on the right. The rest of the school would already be here. But Professor McGonagall showed the first years into a small empty chamber off the hall. They crowded in, standing rather closer than they would usually have done, peering about nervously. Welcome to Hogwarts, said Professor McGonagall. The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the great hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because While you are here, your house will be something like a family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room. The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Raven, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your troops will earn you house points, while any rule breaking lose house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded house cup. A great. I hope each of you will be a credit to which house becomes yours. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as you can while you are waiting. Her eyes lingered for a moment on Neville's cloak, which was fastened under his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair. "Turn when we are ready for you," said Professor McGonagall. "Please wait quietly." She left the chamber. Harry swallowed. "How exactly do they sort us into houses?" he asked Ron. "Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking." Harry's heart gave a horrible jolt. A test? In front of the whole school? But he didn't know any magic. What on earth would he have to do? He hadn't expected something like this when they arrived. He looked around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified too. No one was talking much, except the stranger, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she'd learned, wondering which one she'd need. Harry tried hard not to listen to her. He'd never been more nervous. Never! Not even when he had to take a school report home to the Dursleys, saying that he'd somehow turned his teacher's wig blue. He kept his eyes fixed on the door. Any second now, Professor McGonagall would come back and lead him to his doom. Then something happened which made him jump about a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed. "What the?" he gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghosts streamed through the back wall, pearly white and slightly transparent, glided across the room talking to each other and hardly glancing at the first years. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk was saying, "Forgive and forget, I say. We ought to give him a second chance." "My dear Friar, haven't we given Peeves all the chances he deserves? He gives us all a bad. And you know, he's not really even a ghost. Say, what are you all doing here?" A ghost wearing a ruff and tights has suddenly noticed the first years. He answered. "No students," said that friar, smiling around at them. "About to be sorted, I suppose." A few people nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the friar. "My old house, you know." "Move along now," said the sharp voice. "The sorting ceremony is about to start." Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away the opposite wall. "Now, form a line," Professor McGonagall told the first years, "and follow me." Oddly, as though his legs had turned to lead, Harry got into line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the great hall. Harry imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles which were floating in mid-air above 4 long tables, where the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table, where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here, so that they came to a halt in the other students, with the teachers behind them. The faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shunned Mr. Mainly to avoid all the staring eyes, Harry looked upwards and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper,
"It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. It's in Hogwarts a history."
It was hard to believe there was a ceiling there at all, and that the Great Hall didn't simply open onto the heavens. Harry quickly looked down again, as Professor McGonagall silently placed a four-legged stool for the first years. On top of the stool she put a pointed wizard's hat. This hat was patched and frayed, and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have let it in the house. They had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. That seemed the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds, there was complainance. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide, like a mouth, and the hat began to sing.
"Oh, you may not think I'm me, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your tots sleek and tall. For I'm the Hogwarts sort hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head, the Sorting Hat see. So try me on, and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell brave at heart. Their daring nerve and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Nor yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Nor perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I'm a thinking cap."
The whole hall burst into applause as the hat sung. It bowed to each of the four tables, and then became quite still again. "So we've just got to try on the hat," Ron whispered to Harry. "I'll kill Fred. He was going on about roll." Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he did wish they could have tried it on without everyone watching. The hat seemed to do rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted, or it at the moment. Only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy. That would have been the one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward holding a long roll of parchment. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the to be sorted," she said. "Abbott, Hannah." A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause.
"Hufflepuff!"
shouted. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat friar waving merrily at her. "Bones, Susan!"
"Hufflepuff!"
shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Hannah. "Boot, Teddy!"
"Ravenclaw!"
The table second from the left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them. Brocklehurst Mandy went to Ravenclaw too, but Brown Lavender became the first new Griffin, and the table on the far left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brothers catcalling. Bulstrode Mint then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination, after all he'd heard about Slytherin, but he thought they looked an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel definite now. He remembered being picked for teams during sports lessons at his old school. He had always been last to be chosen, not because he was no good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Fletchley Justin, Hufflepuff. Sometimes, Harry noticed, the hat shouted out the house at once, but at others it took a little while to decide. Diagon Seamus, the sandy-haired boy next to Harry in the line, sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him a Gryffindor. Granger Hermione. Hermione almost ran to the stall and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor! Shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts are very nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with the hat over his eyes for ages, until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there had obviously been a mistake? He'd better get back on the train. When Neville Longbottom, the boy kept losing his toad, was called, he fell over on his way to the stall. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When he entered, Gryffindor! Neville ran off still wearing it, and had to jog back amid gales of laughter to give it to McDougal Morag. Malfoy swaggered forward when his name, and got his wish at once. The hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, Slytherin! Malfoy went to join his friends Crabbe and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many people left. Moon, Knott, Parkinson, and a pair of twin girls, Patil and Patil, then Perks, Sally Ann, and then, at last, Potter? As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out like little hissing fires all over the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter. The last thing Harry the hat dropped over his eyes was a hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. And, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice third. Prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edges of the stall and thought, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, eh? Said the small voice. Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head. Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor! Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat quickly towards the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not put in Slytherin, he hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheer yet. Percy the prefect got up and shook his hand vigorously, while the Weasley twins yelled, We got Potter! We got Potter! Harry sat down opposite the ghost in the rough he'd seen earlier. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry the sudden, horrible feeling he pushed it into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table now. At the end nearest him sat Hagrid, who caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up. Harry grinned back. And there, at the high table in a large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognised him at once from the card he'd got out of the chocolate frog on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the whole hall that shone as the ghosts. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell too, the nervy young man from the leaky cauldron. He was looking very peculiar in a large purple turban. And now there were only 3 people sorted. Turpin Lisa became a Ravenclaw, and then it was Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his fingers under the table, and a second later the Hat had shouted, "Gryffindor!" Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. "Well done, Ron. Excellent," said Percy Weasley pompously across Harry as Sabini Blaze was made a Slytherin. Professor rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry looked down at his empty plate. He'd only just realised how hungry he was. The pumpkin pasties seemed ages ago. Albus Dumbledore had got to his feet. He was beaming at the students, his arms opened wide, as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all there.
"Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are. Nitwit, Blubber, Oddment, Tweak. Thank you."
He sat back down. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. "Is he a bit mad?" he asked Percy uncertainly. "Mad?" said Percy airily. "He's a genius. Best wizard in the world. But he's a bit mad, yes. Potatoes, Harry." Harry's mouth fell open. The dishes in front of him were now piled with food. He'd never seen so many things he'd like to eat on one table. Roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops and lamb chops, sausages, bacon and steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, chips, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and some strange humbugs. The Dursleys had never exactly starved Harry, but he'd never been allowed to eat as much as he'd liked. Dudley had always taken anything that Harry really wanted, even if it made him sick. Harry piled his plate with a bit of everything, except for the humbugs, and began to eat. It was all delicious.
"That does look good,"
said the ghost in the rough sadly, while Harry cut up his steak. "Can't you?"
"I haven't eaten for nearly 400 years.
said the ghost.
I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. I have introduced myself, Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Poppington, at your service, resident ghost of Gryffindor Tower."
"I know who you are," said Ron suddenly. "My brother's told me about you. You're nearly Headless Nick."
"I would prefer call me Sir Nicholas de Mimsy."
The ghost began stiffly, but sandy-haired Seamus Finnegan interrupted. "Nearly headless? How can you be nearly headless?" Sir Nicholas looked extremely miffed, as if their little chat wasn't going at all the way he wanted.
"Like this,"
he said irritably. He seized his left hand. His whole head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder as if it was on a hinge. Someone had obviously tried to behead him, but not done it properly. Looking pleased at the looks on their faces, Nearly Headless Nick flipped his head back onto his neck and said,
"So, new Gryffindors, I hope you're going to help us win the House Championship this year. Gryffindor have never been long without winning. Slytherin have got the cup 6 years in a row. The Baron's becoming almost unbearable. Oh, he's the Slytherin ghost."
Harry looked over at the Slytherin table and saw a horrible ghost sitting there with blank, staring eyes, a gaunt face, and robes stained with silver blood. He was right next to Malfoy, who, Harry was pleased to see, didn't look too pleasing arrangements. "How did he get covered in blood?" asked Seamus with interest.
I've never asked.
said nearly headless Nick delicately. When everyone had eaten as much as they could, the remains of the food faded from the plates, leaving them sparkling clean as before. A moment later,